Alright, for this video tutorial, I wanted to do a walkthrough as to how to use the TurboTax 2022 tax preparation software. So this version we have in front of us is the online cloud-based version, right? So this is just accessed through a web browser. TurboTax obviously also has just a pure desktop version where you can buy the software, download it, install it, and then run it locally there on your laptop. But in this case, we're going to just be using the online version. So a couple of things in front of us. Obviously, I'm logged in right now under this pseudo fake taxpayer here, John Q taxpayer. So obviously, this is not a real person. But the information we've got in front of us are obviously the TurboTax self-employed version of this software. So it's about $90, I think, US. And then the other items we've got in front of us are the support documents, right? So what documents did John get from his employer and his bank, the information he'll need to complete his return. And then lastly, I do just have one slide here which covers what we'll cover in this video and then some of the background or the fact pattern that we're going to be working with. So the topics that we're covering in this video are how to enter the W-2 form for your wages, what to do when you get interest income, so reported to you on a 1099 INT. And then John has some student loans that he's making payments on, so he gets a 1098E, which reports the amount of student loan interest payments that John made during the year. Now, all these other items I'm going to have separate videos on, so go check those out after this one. But the reason I'm focusing on these top three is because these are certainly the most common, right? So most taxpayers find themselves in this position where they just have a W-2. They might have some investment income. Student loans are unfortunately very common. A lot of people have a lot of student loan debt, so they get a lot of 1098Es every year. And then obviously some of these other items might apply to you, but we're going to cover those in subsequent videos. So at the very bottom here, the fact pattern that we're going to be working with, quite simply, we've got John Q taxpayer. He's a sales agent. He lives and works in Florida, so he's a Florida resident full-time. And his tax return is going to be pretty straightforward, right? He gets a W-2 from his job. He has a savings account with his bank, so he gets a little bit of interest income, and they reported that on the 1099 INT. And then lastly, he's got the 1098, which reports the amount of student loan interest that he made payments to the student loan bank, right? So whatever bank fronted the money for the loan, okay? So let's go back to the login for TurboTax, and we'll start walking through some of these different elements and how the interface works. So TurboTax is pretty good. Frankly, I think it covers all the basics, right? And it gives you the option to e-file, which is very, very important. So this is the first screen that we're working with here, right? This is just the My Info screen in the 2022 tax dropdown. So this is where you would enter your information, first, middle, initial, and last name, your social security number, your date of birth, what your occupation is, and then where are you a resident. In our case, John is a Florida resident. He doesn't have any income from other states, and so for that reason, he's only going to need a federal tax return, right? So on the left-hand side here, we can see there's a section for federal where you enter your wages and income, all these other items, and then there is a drop-down for states if you did have that necessity, right? So if you lived in New York or Illinois, a state that has state income taxes, you might need to add a state to be able to prepare that state return. Now, in addition to walking through these entry screens, the other thing that I want to look at, and we will look at periodically over the course of the video, is a review of the return itself. So the tax tools section down here towards the bottom left has a print center, right? And this is very, very helpful, right? So if you open up the print center, you get to print or preview rather also an actual paper version of the return. And this is very, very helpful because one problem with TurboTax, and a lot of tax software is like this, as you enter things and answer the yes or no questions, you don't really see how it's all landing on the return. You only see that until the very end. So as you enter information, you might want to check the return and see, okay, well, what does it look like? So if we do a print preview of the return as it is now, we can see here in TurboTax, we've got John taxpayer. but the return that you're going to note is blank for the most part, right? We have his identifying information up here, right? So we've got the his first and last name, social security number, obviously, again, not a real social security number, the home address, and then the income information down here, nothing, right? So we haven't entered any income information yet. The only item that does populate is the standard deduction, right? So as a single filing taxpayer, his standard deduction is $12,950. Obviously, if we were to enter itemized deductions on Schedule A, then that number might change. But for now, that's all we've got, right? And then on page 2 here, no taxes computed, no credits, nothing. Okay? So let's close out of this. We'll go back to the My Info page. This is where we were starting. So the first things we want to do are enter the wages, right? So wages and income section here on the left. Go ahead and enter the W-2 that we received from John's employer. Now you notice here there are some other options depending on the type of income you might have. So W-2s at the top, again, that applies to most people. But if you have any self-employment income, so if you have to do a Schedule C, or if you had other income reported on a 1099 miscellaneous, investment income is down here in the bottom. And then this item here, income from Form 1099K, this is kind of a tricky one because 1099K reporting really includes all types of gross payments. It doesn't necessarily even mean it might be income. So we'll look at that in a separate video for some scenarios where you might have a reporting obligation there, but there's no tax owed on any of the payments because it's not really actually income to you. Okay, so we'll start with the W-2. Go ahead and click the Start button. Now, we want to work on our W-2, and the nice thing about TurboTax is it does give you the option, depending on your employer, to automatically download and upload some of these details. Right now, because this is not a real company, this is not a real W-2, for purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to have to enter everything manually, which is okay. But if we look at his W-2 here, so notice, right, we're working with the 2022 tax return, so we want our 2022 W-2. And then we've got the fake employer up here, John's name and information. The EIN is the tax ID for the employer, so we'll need that. And then John's social security number here at the top, right? And then obviously boxes 1, 3, and 5 are the income information. And then 2 is the amount of federal income tax withholding that he will apply to his return. And then obviously the social security, Medicare taxes, those are the payroll taxes withheld on your wages, which are generally not refundable, right? We pay that tax and you really don't get any of it back. But depending on your income, you might get some of box 2 back, Okay, so let's go back to the return, start entering some of this information, right? So the EIN, it was just all 9s, right? Right, because again, not a real EIN number. And it does prompt us here, how would we like to input this information? Upload it from the computer, take a picture with your phone and do it that way. In this case, we're just going to type it in ourselves. All right. So, takes us to the next screen. All right, enter that information again. So, you should just enter the information as it is on the W-2. That's fine. 99, fake street address. As soon as you type in the zip code, it should auto-populate the city and state, right? But in case it doesn't, type it in manually and change that information. Okay, so now the employee information, again, this is just going to be John's information. So although your social security number should already be in the system, it does ask you to enter it again, just kind of as a precautionary measure because you want to make sure that everything is lining up. So that's another big issue I see is oftentimes some W-2s have information that's incorrect. It'll have the incorrect social for the employer or the employee rather, or maybe some of the wage or tax withholding items are not accurate. So you really want to double check this, review this when you get it, make sure your employer filled out everything correctly. Okay, so once this preliminary information here on the W-2 is entered, We can go ahead and click continue, move on through to the next phase. So here is where you should enter information exactly as it is on the W-2. So notice here they've got this similar format, box 135, 246 with the same labelings, just like you would see on your W-2 that you get from the employer, and this is the IRS prefab format, right? So we've got box 1, 3, and 5 wages of $41,000, and then the amount of taxes being withheld are over there on the right-hand side of the form. So just enter the information as it is displayed. So I'm going to enter the income information first, and I'll go back to the. So we've got 41,000 in boxes 1, 3, and 5. Now the federal income tax withheld box, $4,100. Okay, so that's that box there, 4,100. The Social Security tax withheld, that amount was 2,542. Okay, 2,542. And then the Medicare wages or Medicare taxes withheld on those wages is $595. Okay, so go back, enter 595. And that's it, right? So we've got that information entered there. Now, it does have down here those additional boxes, right? So less common items. If you have, if you work in the restaurant or bar industry, you might have some tips, right? So tipped income is taxable income to you, right? So it needs to be included in your gross income. And so it is often separately stated as Social Security tips. So you might have these issues here. Box 12 is a variety of different options, right? In this case, none apply to us, but what we do see frequently are things like deferrals to 401k plans. So if you had 401k contributions, you might have something down there, right? Employer provided other types of benefits or contributions to plans. But in this case, frankly, among all of this entire list, most often what we see is the 401k contribution. So that might be something that sticks out to you. If it applies, go ahead and enter it, right? So if you had the 401k contribution, select the appropriate box 12 code and enter the amount, okay? But again, in our case, none of this applies, so we can leave all these blank. We don't have any state taxes or local taxes. Again, that's because we're in Florida, so not an issue for us. But if you were in a state that had these issues, you would see all of that down here starting on line 15. So what state, what's the employer's state ID number, and then the state wages and income taxes withheld. And then if you're in a locality, so let's say if you're in New York and you're in New York City, you'll have all these completed, right? So you have state, New York State wages, New York State income tax, New York City local wages, and New York City's local income tax. Okay. Okay, so again, nothing for us there, so we go ahead and just click through. Asks us to double check state and local income taxes. Again, we don't have any, right? So the reason why they're prompting us here is because they think oftentimes what some employers will do is, like if it's in Florida, they'll enter Florida here in the box, and then maybe they have a state ID number, but there's no actual like state wages or income taxes. Again, there's no withholding. So that's why they give us that prompt to a little double check. Now, what it's done here for us is it's kind of helping us out along the way to kind of anticipate what our refund might be or what we might owe if we stopped right now. So it's letting us know, and up here in the top left, based on the information we've entered, we're going to get a tax refund of $936. All right, and so as we continue to click through here, I do recommend click through, don't skip things, but most of these are not going to apply to you. But of course, you definitely want to read through them to make sure, because there might be something that stick out. So for example, if you worked outside the U.S. at any point during the year, you might have foreign tax credits on earnings that you earned abroad, or you might qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion, right? So a lot of unique things that might apply. So that's why it's always important to just make sure you fully read all of the prompts and make sure you're answering all the questions. Now, we've got the W-2 entered. So what does the return look like now? Remember, if we go to the print center, so we can see kind of what the return looks like as of now. Go ahead and print, save, or preview the return. I'm going to go ahead and view. And so we can see here that page 1 now has populated the wage amounts, right? So there's our wages, 41,000. That's the box 1 wages report on the W-2. So box 1 wages are 41,000. No other income items, right? We haven't entered any other income items or any other expenses. We've still got our standard deduction there because we haven't changed anything. So the 12,950. And then the federal income tax withheld, $4,100, is reported there on line 25A. And just for reference, if we jump back to the W-2, $4,100 is the federal income tax withheld report in box 2. So there's the $4,100. Note that we don't use boxes 4 and 6 in this circumstance for this taxpayer. It's true that if you make over a certain amount of money, there are the employer is required to withhold additional payroll taxes, but you can often get a credit for those excess amounts. But in our case, given John's income level, that's just not an issue for him. So if we go back to the return, so we can see the $4,100, that's a credit he's getting. And now the software has automatically calculated for us how much tax he owes. So he owes $3,164 in taxes. He gets a credit for federal income tax withheld of $4,100. And so the net amount that he's due or owed is going to be this amount reported down here on lines 34 and 35A. So in our case, effectively he overpaid, right? His withholding on his wages was much higher than it needed to be, so he gets a $936 tax refund. All right, so that's the way the return looks like for now, but of course we've still got some other information to enter. So if I go back to the wages and income tab, let's move on to the next piece, which is the interest income. So if I go to the interest income, 1099 INT, so he gets a 1099 INT from his bank. So we've got the bank over here on the left-hand side, the tax ID number for the bank, John's recipient TIN, that's his social security number, and of course his name, street address. And then the relevant fields for us here are going to be making sure that the tax years are right. So this is for the calendar year 2022. And there's the amount of interest. So he's got $12.35 in interest income that was paid into his bank account during the year. That's the taxable amount of interest. So if we go back to the tax return, let's go ahead and enter this information. So we scroll down to the investments and savings. Here they've highlighted for us that if we have a 1099 INT, we can go ahead and enter it here. So jump into the edit menu. And it asks us here, okay, so do we have any investment income? Yes, we have interest, right? So we have interest income. So we're going to go ahead and check yes. Do we have any crypto income in 22? No, right? We've just got the interest. Get ready to be impressed. Now this is what's also handy, right? So if you have a bank that partners with TurboTax, a lot of this can be uploaded and downloaded just automatically. You don't have to enter in the information. Again, similar to the employer problem, this is not a real bank, this is not a real taxpayer, so I'm not going to be signing in to any account here and entering this or downloading it. I'm going to have to enter it manually. So I've got interest income here. Go ahead and click continue. Again, you can log in through your bank to download it, upload the picture, or I'm going to take the long route here and type it in myself. Okay, so I'm typing in myself. The bank, what's the fake bank name? Name of U.S. Bank Inc. Okay, not a real bank. So name of U.S. Bank Inc. Okay, and the amount of interest income, remember, it was $12.35. That's the amount of interest I got. Now, some of these 1099s will issue amounts to you with the pennies, right? So they won't round it off to whole dollar amounts. You can enter it like this, but when you look at the return, it's going to just round this down to 12. So often, you can just do the rounding yourself, report 12 like that and be done with it, because that's the ultimate answer that's going to be provided for you and what's going to get transmitted. Or if you want to be as precise as possible, go ahead and enter the $12.35, and then just let the software do the rounding for you. In our case, we're going to just let it do it for us. Okay. Now, again, it's going to ask us some additional yes or no questions, see if any of these apply. In our case, none of this is going to apply. Again, we're trying to keep it as this fact pattern as simple and straightforward as possible. So none of these are going to apply. Go ahead and click continue, work our way through the prompts. Okay, so investments and savings, and it will list in drop-down format the different types of investments and savings we have. So in our case, we've got interest income for one form 1099, just regular interest income, so taxable interest income, none of it's taxes exempt, municipal bond interest or anything like that. Go ahead and click confirm. And there we go. So now we got our interest income entered. So again, if we quickly look at the print center again, just to see how the return's being updated here, just so we can see how these things are flowing through. 2022, print the forms. And now we notice what's changed here on page 1. We've still got our wages up there, right? On line 1A, there's the 41,000. And on line 2B, we have our interest. So there's that 12. Remember, as I noted, we report whole dollars on the tax return. You don't report the cents. So that's why we don't see 12.35. We just see 12. That's okay, right? You can just use whole dollar amounts. The Form 1040 instructions actually tell us to just report the whole dollars. Don't worry about the cents. So our updated total income number now is $41,012. Still got the standard deduction. And again, nothing's changed down here for the payments, right? We still have $4,100 in federal income tax withheld on our wages. And then the tax might update for that additional $12 in income. Okay? All right, so that's the recent update. So now let's go back. Let's go back to this page here and go back to our support. So we've gone through our 1099 interest. We've gone through the W-2. Now it's just a matter of entering the last item, which is the 1098. So for the 1098, obviously it's not income to us. It was an expense. But if we review the 1098 here quickly before we go back to the return. So the student loan company that loaned us the money here, recipient TIN, right? That is the borrower here in this case. Looks like the formatting here in the TINs was backwards. So the recipient is the party that receives the interest payment. So in this case, the student loan company, this would be their EIN, and the borrower is John, right? So it's all nines for purposes of this example, but you would see the hyphens in different areas. Not a huge deal, but that's why the format looks a little different than it should be. But we've got, okay, so the TINs for each party, the borrower's name, right? This is John. Q taxpayer again, his address, and then there in box 1 we have the total student loan interest received by the lender. So that's the amount of interest. Right now, if John's making payments that include interest and principal, we're not going to report the principal, we're just reporting the interest amount. So if John knows that he spent, let's say he sent him $6,000 during the year, he's like, why don't I see 6,000? Well, because again, it's just the interest received by the lender, it's not the principal payments. So $3,065 in interest. Let's go through and see where to enter that on our tax return here. So if we go back to the return, obviously this isn't wage and income section, so we want to be either in the deductions and credits or it might be in other tax situations. So if we look at deductions and credits, we can see, okay, so home, child tax credit, earned income credit, not us, charitable contributions. Okay, so here we go, right? There's an education section. So education section, scholarships, student loans, tuition fees. So there's our 1098E, right? 1098T is a reporting form for the amount of tuition you might have paid to an institution during the year. 1098E is the interest. So let's go ahead and do this drop-down menu here, and then we can enter the 1098E information for the lender. So 1098E for student loan interest, yes, right? As long as the 1098E is in your name, We can check if you qualify for the deduction. And yep, you might have multiple 1098E forms, right? Okay, so we do have a 1098E. Click yes. IRS will only let you claim it if your name is on the 1098E, right? Very important, right? You can only claim student loan interest that you paid, right? So I can't claim interest that my brother paid, right? It follows the student, right? Very important. Okay, so my name is on there. And in my case, again, I'm not going to upload it. I'm going to go ahead and type it in myself because I like to do all the extra work. So, name of the lender, let's see. So that lender was Student Loan Company, Inc. All right, so Student Loan Company, Inc. Again, not a real company. And what was the amount of interest I paid? I paid $3,065. So John did $3,065 of interest. $3,065. Okay, perfect. Now I'll click continue. Now, okay, so it gives us a summary of the information we entered. So this is the lender, the amount of interest paid. Now at this point in the process, it only tells us how much interest we paid, so how much was entered. It does not get to the point yet where it tells us how much is deductible. And that's really important. The student loan interest is capped at certain amounts and there are phase outs. So now, next screen, this is the information we wanted to see, right? So we get a tax break. The amount of student loan interest that we can deduct for the year is $2,500, right? So we don't get to deduct the full amount. And that's what's unfortunate about this deduction is it is capped quite low in my opinion. $2,500. A lot of students are paying significantly more in interest than that. But nevertheless, we still get a deduction. It's just limited. So enter the full amounts as you see them on the 1098s. But the amount that is deductible is going to be different. Often will be, right? Especially if you have more. Obviously, if we had less, if we had only maybe, let's say, $800 in interest, maybe we deduct the whole $800. Obviously, there's other phase outs, such as income phase outs, but in our case, that's what we got. So we go back to the print center here, and we will go ahead and do another print preview of the return. Again, 2022 return, viewer print forms. And we'll have a look and see how these things have changed yet again. So if I go down here to page 1 of the 1040, so we've got our wages, right? Nothing's changed there. There's our $12 in interest income. And then here on line 10, we can see the adjustments. So Schedule 1 is where we report adjustments, so additions or subtractions from income in arriving at AGI. So if I scroll down to Schedule 1, additional income and adjustments. So Part 1 has amounts that are being added to income, and then Part 2 has the reductions to income in arriving at adjusted gross income. So you can see here Part 1 is blank, right? We haven't added any additional income items, but we needed Schedule 1 because we have Part 2 adjustments. We have our student loan interest deduction. So there on line 21, we can see the student loan interest deduction of $2,500, and that number is ultimately flowing up to the 1040 right here on line 10. Okay, so there's our deduction, right? So we've got our $41,000 minus the 25. There's our net adjusted gross income, and then again we're taking our standard deduction here because John doesn't have a house, he doesn't pay real estate taxes, right? He rents his property, no medical bills, no charitable deductions. So for him, and like most taxpayers, claiming the standard deduction will yield you the best benefit. So now that that's been factored in, we've got his adjusted taxable income down there. The tax, we've still got the $4,100 coming through from his W-2. And so after claiming that student loan interest deduction, it has increased his refund from that $900 amount up to $1,236. Okay? All right, so that covers this first tutorial on how to walk through the form. Obviously, please feel free to check out some of the other videos if you have other items that need to be entered that haven't been covered in this first one where we only really had just three pieces of information. So thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below, and I look forward to seeing you again on the other videos. Thank you.